Good morning, everyone. The webinar will begin in just a few minutes. While waiting, I do encourage you to download the handout available that's under the Handouts tab on the control panel. And while we do wait for the webinar to begin, we do have Christy Frieden with us. Good morning, Christy.
Good morning, Patrick.
Christy, with so many changes over the past year and a half, and with many people working remotely and now returning to the office, what are some of the challenges that you are seeing with people adjusting to the new normal?
Yes, it certainly is a tremendous challenge for both organizations and employees. And it really does depend. It seems like the more people I talk to, it really does depend on each person's preference or personality, whether they're excited to get back into the office and be around people, or they've kind of adjusted to working from home and independently that way. But I do, I think there is a huge opportunity to promote employee engagement during this time if it's done correctly. So just a little bit of advice I have for both on the organizational side and then on the employee side. I think it's a great opportunity for discussion, to have these conversations with employees. And for organizations, what I suggest is having a game plan on what we're communicating and what our expectations are of our employees as they come back into the office, or if there's some type of hybrid model where they can work from home or and come back to the office. So it's important that organizations have these discussions, thinking about, what are our expectations of employees, focusing on results and goals and productivity and quality and quantity, that type of thing. And then on the employee side, I think it's important, if you want to have that discussion with your boss and, what your particular preference is for your schedule, talk in terms of, what worked for you, what didn't work for you, what are your expectations of the organization going forward, and, what value, whatever schedule you prefer, what value does that add to the organization if you continue on with that schedule or whatever it may be. So think in terms of results that way as well. So I think it's a great opportunity for both organizations and employees to have discussion and really promote engagement during this time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if it's done correctly.
Right. Yeah, I really think the pandemic's really changed things in more ways than we actually are going to realize right now. So
I totally agree. Totally agree.
Okay. So we are right at 11 o'clock. So
Okay.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, Managing Transition and Embracing Change During Challenging Times. Since we want to continue to deliver these informational webinars for you and practice social distancing, we are delivering this webinar remotely. Your presenter, Christy Frieden, will be presenting from her office and me from mine. My name is Patrick Allen. I'm the program manager for Kent State's Center for Corporate and Professional Development's public open enrollment programs. Our center specializes in providing employee development for partnering organizations in Northeast Ohio and around the world. We offer training as public open enrollment programs currently being delivered live and virtually via Zoom, and also customized programs that can be delivered live and virtual or in person at your location. I am joined today by Kent State facilitator Christy Frieden. I will be serving as your host, and Christy will be our presenter for today. Christy specializes in motivating, training, and coaching professionals, supervisors, managers, and executives in areas of change, leadership, customer service, emotional intelligence, and employee engagement. She has over 17 years of healthcare management experience, most recently working for Cleveland Hospital as a manager of performance management, then as an organizational and performance development specialist. She attained the Developing Leadership through Emotional Intelligence certificate from Case Western Reserve University's Weatherhead School of Management, and also holds a bachelor's degree from Slippery Rock University and a master's from West Virginia University in vocational counseling. Her passion and dynamic presentation style, as well as her down-to-earth attitude, engages and motivates her audience to focus on their strength and achieve personal and professional success. For Kent State, Christy facilitates programs such as effective organizational leadership, understanding emotional intelligence, working together to achieve results, and today's topic, managing transition and embracing change during challenging times. Everyone in attendance has been muted to avoid background noise from any of the nearly 100 registered participants. We do encourage you to ask questions at any point during the hour. You can submit your questions in writing using the questions tab on the control panel on the right side of your screen. I will present your questions to Christy as time permits throughout the hour. There is also a handout available to you that summarizes today's presentation. It's located under the Handouts tab on the control panel. We encourage you to download it and take notes during today's presentation. We are recording today's webinar, and you will receive an email next week with a link to the recording after we conclude our time together. And now I'd like to introduce Christy Frieden. Christy, I think you might be muted.
Yes, so sorry. All right.
There you go.
All right, very good. Thank you. Welcome everybody to today's session talking about change during challenging times. I've been working with Kent State now for, hard to believe, but over 10 years as a facilitator. And I do a variety of topics, as Patrick mentioned, but it seems like this topic of change is quite popular lately, and I'm very, very happy to be with you today to share with you my thoughts, some tools, my perspective on it, hoping to give you some ideas that you can take away and will help you personally and also professionally, help you help others in your organization to try to handle the change that's happening and move forward and come out on the other side even better than before. So I'll give you some ideas that you can hopefully take away and utilize. So today's objectives, we're going to talk about the change process. Identify the key aspects of adaptability and what that looks like. Certainly with change comes a lot of stress. So how do you manage stress? I'm going to give you some tools there. And then, you want to be on the forefront in your organization of taking on this change and all these challenges that come your way. So how do you develop that role of being a change agent for your organization? So I'm going to give you some tools to utilize there that you can use within your organization to promote whatever change is going on. All right, for some reason I keep muting myself here. All right, so my first question for you, and this came, I got this cartoon, someone texted it to me on New Year's Eve, which I thought was great. But the question I have for you is, what was the biggest challenge that you overcame in the last year, and what did you learn from it? So two parts of this. So I want you to reflect on the biggest challenge you overcame in the last year, and more importantly, what did you learn from it? I've been doing this class. I actually did something similar in person yesterday, talking with people and asked this same question. And things came up about just being flexible. In the moment, you're just kind of scrambling. You don't know what to do. You're just kind of going from one thing to the next, trying to get it all done. But realizing as you come out on the other side just how much you really did accomplish, how quickly you're able to pivot, and how flexible you've become, and just all the things, the different ways of working, the things that you've done and learned in the past year. So important. I know for myself, it was a struggle moving from in-person classes to online classes. And honestly, my first reaction was, well, guess I can't do this anymore. I really was not thinking it was even possible to do what I'm doing remotely. But interesting how with time and practice and developing your skill, things work out. So real important question to think about and to understand about yourself and what you took away. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute, why it's so important to focus on what you learn and how you grew. So we do have the first polling question here that I really kind of like to know the answer to. So, you know, as you reflect back on the past year and a half, how do you think you personally handled the change? So A, I went through it with ease, no issues here. B, good days and bad days. Ultimately, I learned a lot about myself and got through it. Or C, still trying to adjust to my new normal. You know, it's hard, but you know, it's hard to find any good in it. So if you could answer the polling question, number 1 here.
Okay, just a few more seconds because it looks like just about everybody has voted. And then I will close it.
All right.
It looks like 74% said good and bad days and that they learned a lot about themselves. 24 said they went through it with ease and no issues. And just 3% said they're trying to adjust to the new normal and find any good in it.
Okay, well, thank you so much for your honesty and answering that. It gives me an idea of where you are and accepting what's been going on. You know, I think prior to the pandemic, often when I would ask questions about, hey, are you good with change? And people would be like, oh, I don't know. Now asking it, you know, majority is like, yeah, I guess I am pretty good with change. So maybe gotten some confidence in maybe handling things, challenges that come your way. So good to know, and I appreciate your honesty. And we're going to have another polling question related to your organization later on in the session, but really great to know. So thank you so much for sharing. All right. So when we talk about change, change and transition, there is a difference here, and I would like to explain it. I may utilize these words interchangeably throughout the session today, but there is a difference, and I think it's important to understand. When you think about the whole idea of change is situational, it's external, and it can occur very quickly. So, you know, you get downsized, you get bought out, there's a pandemic and everything shuts down. These are things that happen very, very quickly and they're external to us. Transition, on the other hand, is the psychological process that people go through to come to terms with the new situation, and that's internal and it takes time. So change is external to us and it happens very quickly. Transition, on the other hand, is that psychological process everybody has to go through in order to come to terms with it, and that takes time. So that's important for you to know. Especially if you're a leader in an organization or a supervisor, that oftentimes the leaders know in advance and they have a time to adjust psychologically. And then when they announce it, they wonder, oh, why aren't people on board with this? This is a great idea. But everybody, whether the change is good or bad, or it's going to benefit them or not, it's that psychological process that everyone has to go through. So it's important to keep that in mind. So the phases of transition are also important for you to know. So there's 3 phases. We've got the current state, where people are ending, losing, kind of letting go of what they knew, into the temporary state, which is that in between confusion. You know, we're trying to build that new normal. And then finally you end up into the future state, where you come up with that new understanding, identity, maybe new attitude. And what you'll notice up in the corner there is a little trapeze, because I like the trapeze metaphor for this. When you think about, let's say, this is kind of a funny example. Let's say my boss says, all right, Christy, in order to be successful in this organization, you got to climb that 50-foot tower and you got to swing over to the other side and land And so I'd say, oh gosh, all right. So here I am climbing. I'm in the current state. I'm climbing up that 50-foot tower. I'm standing there waiting for the bar to swing my way. So what could be going through my mind? You know, things like, why are they making me do this? This is stupid. I'm going to die. I don't think I can do this. This is not for me. I think I have to go, you know, whatever it may be. So that's what I might be thinking in my current state. Then the bar swings my way. I jump. I grab that bar. I'm in the air swinging. I'm in the temporary state. What could be going through my mind? Things like, you know, hold on. I'm never doing this again, or this is great. I love it. This is exciting, or just don't let go, you know, just keep going. So all these things could be going through my mind. And then I finally land on the other side on the platform, land in the future state. Again, what could be going through my mind? Oh, thank God it's over. That was terrible. Or thank God it's over. Now this is great. You know, your emotions can be all over the place. Or, hey, I'm going to go over and, you know, tell people, you know, how wonderful it is over here and give them support. You know, all of these things could be going through your mind. So even though this is a little trapeze metaphor, in change, I'm sure you've either thought those thoughts or even maybe said them out loud in a real change scenario that was going on, maybe in your organization. So whether it's a good or bad change, it's important to know that we all have to go through these phases of transition in order to accept and be okay with what's going on. As a side note too, you know, you can't make someone accept a change. You can offer encouragement and support and provide them information and all of those things, but really it's an internal process that people have to go through by themselves or independently to come to terms with it. So important to keep that in mind. And ultimately, when we decide to accept whatever change is going on, it really is our choice whether we're viewing it as a threat or an opportunity. So important. You know, everything that comes our way, any change that happens, I think it's a human inclination to view it as a threat. It may be a threat to our status quo or our comfort zone or our skills or whatever it may be. So ultimately, we initially look at it as a threat, but the sooner we can get to view it as an opportunity, the better. When we talk about being adaptable, adaptable people focus more on the opportunity than the adversity. And if we can get ourselves more to the opportunity quicker, that's going to help us accept a change that's going on. So there's a whole list here of great questions. These are listed also on your handout of what adaptable people focus on. And if you think about a current challenge that you're facing, these are great questions to ask yourself. You know, what currently can I learn from this experience? How can I grow wiser, stronger, and better because of it? What opportunities does this change present? And I like this next one. What do I want to achieve? So often when there's a change that happens, we feel like we're in victim mode, like it's happening to us, instead of looking for what we want to achieve in a certain situation. And then once you determine what do you want to achieve, what positive actions do you need to take to get there? Instead of just waiting for it to happen and waiting for that change to come down, is there a way that you can be proactive to be able to you know, take steps to achieve what you want? So instead of being in victim mode, we get into proactivity. Instead of viewing it as adversity, we view it as opportunity. And so real important as we handle any type of adversity that comes our way, or challenge or change, that we're finding the opportunity in it, and that's key. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about stress. So stress is not necessarily all bad. There is such a thing as good stress. Now, good stress is defined as being episodic, so it doesn't happen all the time. It's just certain episodes of stress. It helps us to gear up for a challenge and it gives us time to recover, and it gives us energy. So when you think about maybe a situation you've been in where you've had to give a presentation, or you've had to, you know, perform a skill at a certain level, and you get those butterflies in your stomach. So that's a indication, you know, we're feeling some stress, and that stress, it gears us up to perform for whatever we may be doing. Now, the bad stress, on the other hand, is what we don't want. And this is unfortunately chronic. So it happens all the time, and it leads to burnout, and it can sometimes takes months to recover. And it makes you feel exhausted. And unfortunately, when we experience stress on a regular basis, even that little amount of cortisol that gets dumped into our system, it's kind of that constant drip of cortisol that doesn't let us recover. And unfortunately, that is what really becomes a real health problem for people. So it's important that you're taking the initiative for yourself to relieve stress, because nobody is going to relieve stress for you. You have to do it for yourself. So it's important to consider. So what is stress, and where does it come from? Stress is in that gap between reality and our expectations, or what's expected of us. So what's expected of us and what the reality of the situation is, and there's a gap there, and that oftentimes is what leads to stress. So the question then is, where do expectations come from? You know, when we think about expectations that are put upon us, where do they come from? And we can say, you know, they come from our boss or our organization. They come from family members, friends, the responsibilities that we have, maybe our past, maybe things we've done in the past, and now they're carrying forward as expectations of us in the future. But one of the toughest set of expectations that we face is the expectations that we put upon ourselves, because sometimes those expectations aren't realistic at all. We're expected to be perfect. We're expected to get it all done. We expect to do it right, always right the first time. And we have to give ourselves a break sometimes. So I would suggest, number one, you really take a good look at what expectations you're putting upon yourself, and are they realistic expectations, and can you give yourself a break there? And then for the others, when others have expectations of you, it's important that you're managing those expectations. So for example, your boss comes to you with a new top priority. You need to get this done right now. And so what can you do? You need to have a conversation and say, okay, I can take this on right now, but just so you know, this, you know, I've got 5 other things going on, and these 2 are going to have to wait till tomorrow or wait till next week if I take this on. Does that seem doable? You know, manage those expectations. Don't keep taking on and taking on and taking on, and not ever saying no, or hey, if I do this, this is going to be, you know, this is the trade-off for something else that I'm doing. So have those conversations. Don't just say yes and take on and take on, and ultimately you know that you can't accomplish all of it. There's only so many hours in a day, and only so much we can do. So it's important that we need to manage others' expectations of us as we go through our day, whether it's personal or professional. And that's where a lot of our stress comes from. So to keep that in mind. Now, I do have a really great model that I use and I share with others in helping to manage stress, or help us to at least think about it differently. So what I'd like you to do quickly, just on a sheet of paper, is list your current worries, concerns, frustrations, and stressors. So I'm just going to give you a minute to just jot down on a piece of paper your current worries, concerns, frustrations, and stressors. All right. So I'm going to share with you this model, and as I'm going through it, I want you to think about where each of those things that you have written down fall. So it's important that we evaluate where do we spend our emotional energy. When we think about our worrying and what we're stressed out about, what is it that we're focused on, and what is it that we're worried about, and this helps us to prioritize that, or at least give us a different perspective on it. So in the center there, that green circle in the center is what I refer to as your sphere of control. So you think about who or what falls in our sphere of control. Well, the only person that we have full and total control over is ourselves. And we think about ourselves, what do we have control over? It's what we say, what we do, our behavior, how we go about our work, how we accomplish tasks, what we eat, how we spend our free time. I mean, these are all things that we have full and total control over. Now, it may not be easy. You see that big bag of Cheetos in the pantry, and you shouldn't eat it, but you eat it anyway. So sometimes it's hard to overcome some of those urges that we have, or some of the things that maybe we know we shouldn't be doing, but we do it anyway. But ultimately, when we think about having control, we only have control over ourselves. So moving out to the next circle, our yellow circle there, that's our sphere of influence. So who or what falls in this category? Essentially, anybody that you interact with. And when we think about influence, the more trust that's built in a relationship, ideally, the more influence you have over someone. So that the closer you are as far as relationship goes, the more influence that you have. Now, as a side note here, depending on your role, like in an organization, you may have influence over certain policies or procedures or initiatives, things like that. So you also need to keep that in consideration. So when we think about some of our worries and concerns and that type of thing, are there ways that we can influence? If influence somebody, for example, and if someone's doing something that we don't like, is there, we can't control them. So what we need to do is change our influencing strategy, because that's really all that we can do. So when you think about influencing strategies, I'm sure this is a whole class in itself, but ultimately, when you think about influence, you think about, being a role model for what you'd like to see that person do, or consequences to their behavior. On the flip side of consequences are reward and recognition. Those are ways of influence. Facts, data, information, those are also ways of influence, as well as tapping into someone's emotions. So best practices or stories, personal experience. These are all ways of influence. So thinking about, again, if someone's not doing what we want them to do, the only thing we can do is try to change our influencing strategy. Now, going out to the last circle, that's our sphere of concern, or what I like to say, no control. So we may be concerned about it, but we absolutely have no control over it. So who or what falls in this category? And really, everything else falls in this category. The pandemic, the traffic, the weather, all other things fall in this category. So it's a really interesting exercise to put our stressors and worries and concerns into this model. And if any of that falls into the red area or the sphere of concern, you got to let it go. Don't waste your time worrying. I suppose what you could do is maybe mitigate the risk. Like if you are worried about something, maybe like for example, if you're worried about losing your job, what can you do? You can work on your resume, okay? So that's all you can do, and that falls in control, essentially. You can work on your personal resume. But as far as worrying about it, you got to let some of this stuff go, because there's nothing you can do about it. Certainly, if it falls in influence, you may want to think about your approach to a situation, But the more you can focus on what you can control, your mindset, your attitude, your behavior, your approach, that's what you want to work on, because everything else, you really you can't do anything about. So it's a real interesting model, and I find it to be helpful personally. And I've shared it with so many people, and they also have found it to be helpful. So I wanted to throw that out there for you to help you with some of the anxiety or worry that you have going on as far as change goes. And then additional techniques for relieving stress. Now, these aren't all inclusive, but they're a good start. Utilizing that power of positive attention. Am I, focused on the right things? Focus on what's going well instead of what's not. Maintaining a learner mindset, getting a proper sleep, maintaining a healthy diet, exercise, meditation, and there's many others, but wanted to throw that out there to you so you have that. All right. So want to get into a little bit about accountability and talking about, let me back it up here, talking about just accountability and change. So in any type of a change initiative, when we think about accountability, there's two definitions here. So subject having to report, explain, justify being answerable or responsible. That's the Webster's Dictionary definition. And the second one is a personal choice to rise above one's circumstance, demonstrate the ownership necessary for achieving the desired result. Essentially, to see it, to own it, to solve it, to do it. This is a definition from the Oz principle. And what I like about these two definitions, when you look at these two definitions, the first one's very after the fact, reactive. The second one, more proactive. And when we're promoting accountability within our organization, especially doing any type of a change, we need to promote proactivity. So we want people to realize it's a personal choice. So this accountability ladder goes hand in hand with that. And this is, we all fall somewhere on this ladder in terms of a change initiative that's happening. And so it's important that you know where you are on this ladder. And then if you're in a supervisory position, where the people that, report to you are, or even thinking about your colleagues or coworkers. So let me quickly review this ladder and figure out, how do I know where I am on this ladder? And how do I move up the ladder? Because the goal is you want to move up the ladder. So the first point on the ladder is someone who is unaware of the situation. So let's say there's some type of new change initiative that happens within the organization, and this person is completely unaware that it's going on. Now, maybe they're out on medical leave, maybe they're brand new, they don't know we've done it differently, but essentially they're unaware. Moving up to number 2 then is the person in blaming mode. So this is a person that says things like, if it wasn't for my new boss, I wouldn't have to do it this way. Or if it wasn't for this new coworker I have, I wouldn't have to waste my time, training her and then not getting my own work done. If it wasn't for this new initiative, we wouldn't have to be doing all this dumb stuff, okay? So this is the person who is in blaming mode. Moving up to 3 is rationalizing. So this person says something like, you know what, I've been here 15 years, I've done it this way, it's worked out just fine, and I'm not about to change now. So the person who can just rationalize it away. And number 4 is the hope it goes away person. If we just wait long enough, they'll change their mind and it'll go away. So I've heard phrases like flavor of the month. This is just the flavor of the month, and if we just wait long enough, they'll change their mind. So 1 through 4 are what's considered victim positions. So we move up to 5, and 5 is at least acceptance that the change is happening. 6 is then the person who's looking for my role in it. So what is my personal role in making this change initiative happen? 7 is the person who's looking for solutions, because in any change there can be conflict or unanticipated barriers. This is the person who's actively looking for solutions. And 8 is that just do it, I'm on board, moving it forward person. So you want to at least get to 5. 5 is acceptance, and then 5 through 8 are proactive positions. So the question becomes, how do you know if you are below the line? So I have a few questions here or not questions, but a few statements here to help you realize if you may be below the line. So you feel captive or lack control over your present circumstances. You find yourself blaming others and pointing fingers. Your discussions focus more on what you cannot do rather than what you can do. You find yourself being sought out by others so they can tell you what someone else did to them this time. Meaning, if you're the person people are going to complain and kind of moan about this situation, and you're feeding into it, that may be an indication you're below the line. You feel you're being treated unfairly and you don't think there's anything you can do about it, and you spend a lot of time talking about things you cannot change. So these are maybe indications you may be below the line. Now we talk about excuses, or excuses that you've heard or you've said, and these are some of the excuses that are kind of common. That's the way we've always done it. It's not my job. I didn't know you needed it right away. It's not my fault. That's not my department. No one told me what to do. I'm waiting for approval. I don't know. I forgot. I'm too busy to do it. No one invited me to the meeting, and nobody's followed up with me, so it can't be that important. So I'm sure some of you are smiling. You recognize those excuses. And the thing about it is, we've all heard those excuses, and we've all said those excuses at some point in our lives. And sometimes they're true, right? Sometimes you are waiting for approval. But the point here is, if any of those things are your go-to responses, it may be indication you're below the line. Or if you are in a supervisory position and someone has come to you and constantly utilizing a set of excuses, it may be an indication that they are below the line. So important that we try to, well, first of all, we need to get ourselves above the line and try to move others above the line in order to, promote change and have it be successful. So these questions are actually listed in your materials for your reference, but these are helpful questions to help you move above the line, or questions to ask others to help them move above the line. First of all, what's within your control? That's an important one. Oftentimes when we're complaining or we're making excuses, we're focused on everything that's not within our control. So we need to bring it back to what's within our control. What brings you here every day? Meaning, what do you like about the job? What is working for you? So instead of thinking about everything that's not working or things that are going wrong, what is working in your current role or position? What are your strengths? So much, I have done a session on strengths, but so much of our engagement and passion comes from utilizing our strengths. So it's important to know what your strengths are and utilize those on a daily basis. What do you enjoy? What do you find joyful in the work that you do? And then if you feel like you are struggling below the line, what is holding you back? That's really, really important as well. Thinking about, really trying to determine what that is. And is there something that you can do about that? So these are real important questions, to have an honest conversation about, with yourself about, but also if you're a supervisor and someone might be below the line, great questions to ask them and open some real great dialogue as far as that goes. So I have my second polling question here. And as you think about the past year and a half, how do you think your organization did in handling what went on? So A, great, we stayed on top of challenges we faced, stayed flexible and came out ahead. B, we managed to make the changes necessary, did the best we could and came out about the same. Or C, we did not manage the challenges well. Our organization is still struggling and trying to pick up the pieces. So if you could answer the second polling question for me.
Just a few more seconds while people are still voting. Okay, it looks like just about everybody voted. Oh, it looks like 58% came, great, we stayed on top of the challenges that came out
Okay.
ahead. 36%, we managed the changes and came out about the same. And then only 6%, we did not manage the challenge as well and still struggling.
All right, excellent. Happy to hear that. I'm glad that the majority is number or A there. And B, again, organizationally, it was a tough road as well. So glad to see that you're maintaining, at least maintaining, and made the changes necessary. So I'm glad to hear that. Glad to hear it. And an organization is only made up of individuals to, to get the work done. So important that we're focused on each and every person within the organization and how they're handling what's going on. And so that's why we think about this accountability ladder and having these discussions so important, because if someone isn't handling things well, it's also an important discussion to have. Is there something you can do to help them? Is the current role or the current organization just not a fit for them? So the accountability ladder, what I like about it is that it's really helpful. It's very simple, and you can really open a lot of great dialogue by just showing the person, hey, here's the accountability ladder. Where do you think you are on this? And accepting the change that's going on. And then it can really open some great dialogue. So very important. In terms of coaching people above the line, number one, we want to listen. We want to listen to their concerns. Two, we want to acknowledge what their concerns are, showing empathy, acknowledge where they're coming from. Acknowledgement doesn't necessarily mean you agree, but it's showing some empathy about the current circumstance. Then three is the ask, and the question is something along the lines of, okay, so given your current circumstances, what else can you do to move forward? So just by flipping the script a little bit, moving from victim to proactivity can help. What else can you do to accomplish the goal? Or what else, maybe there's certain parts of it that you can't work on right now, but what can you work on? So very important. Providing feedback and certainly helping commit to their progress. Very important. Okay, so when we are trying to help others move up the ladder, a couple important points here, additional points. We want to make that direct connection between their job and the organization's desired results, which can tap back into the expectations of either moving back to the office or the hybrid model of, um, working from home and the office. What's that direct connection between what they do and their organization's desired results? What's the that vision and purpose that motivates people? It's good to find that out. What are their long-term goals? What are their career goals? These are important things to find out. We need to set those expectations, and we need to reward that above the line behavior. When you see people taking initiative, being above the line, acknowledge it. So important. Okay. All right, and lastly here, I do have a couple of tools, and I want to mention, when we see people that are resisting, what can we do with that? So why do people resist? Essentially, one of four reasons. They don't know what's expected of them, they don't know how, something's getting in their way, and they don't want to. Now, when you take a look at this list, the hardest thing to deal with as a supervisor is someone who just doesn't want to, okay? But oftentimes it may look like they don't want to, but one of these other things is coming into play. Maybe they don't know what's expected of them. Maybe you haven't had that conversation very clearly. Maybe they don't know how and they're too embarrassed to admit they don't know how. Or maybe something's getting in their way, whether it's a lack of resources or, maybe there's some type of like an internal conflict between a coworker. There's a lot of different things that can get in the way. So it's important, I do this as a checklist because it's important that you're looking at all of it before you just jump to the conclusion that they don't want to, that they just have a bad attitude and they don't want to. It can be many, many other things, and it's worth considering. But when you're trying to overcome resistance, important things to think about is make sure you're communicating. So with this challenge of moving back to the office or keeping the hybrid model or staying virtual, communicate, communicate, communicate in all different kinds of ways. There's an exercise you can do which is helping and hindering, and this is in your materials on the second page. It's doing a helping and hindering exercise where you think about, what are the things that are helping this change be successful and what are the things that are hindering it? And then it helps you to prioritize and focus on what you can do something about. With them, people want to know what's in it for me. So there's an exercise, a personal gains and losses exercise, thinking about, what are the losses people are going to be experiencing, and then what are the gains, and have that clear in your mind before you start communicating to employees of whatever the change may be. And then doing a threats versus opportunities exercise. Threats if we don't do this in 3 to 6 months, and opportunities if we do. This is a great real-time exercise to do with a group of people to get everybody on board with whatever might be going on. Giving resistors a part to play, that's always important. Maybe some of the people that you've had who've been there a long time, they have a lot of knowledge. Giving them a part to play can be very beneficial, and of course empathizing where they are and why they have the perspective they do. That's really, really important. And lastly, before we open this up to questions, I do want to mention the marathon effect. So going back to leaders and going back to that whole idea of transition and being on board with the change. Oftentimes as leaders, if you're in a leadership position, you're maybe ahead of the game as far as planning for some type of a change or a policy or something like that. And when you introduce it to your team, they're behind. Just like in a marathon where some people, depending on their time, they start first, and then there's the next group and the next group and the next group. Think about what you can do to help people along, to help people be okay with whatever change you've got going on, because remember, they're making that psychological transition, and whatever you can do to be a part of it, because maybe you've already made that transition psychologically. And so the marathon effect comes into play when you maybe know something ahead of time, and by the time you introduce it, there's a difference in where people are as far as accepting it. So be empathetic toward that. But with that being said, hopefully now you have a little more understanding about the change process. The keys to adaptability are to look for that opportunity, looking at what you can control as far as managing stress and setting those expectations. And then there's some tools there, the accountability ladder and those additional tools in the back of your materials to help you have those discussions and exercises about being on top of and communicating that change. So with that being said, are there any questions, Patrick, that anybody has?
Yes, we did have some submitted to us. First, can you be above the line in some things and below the line in others?
Yes, so that is a great question, and yes, and sometimes on a daily basis you can be above and below the line. So yeah, so there can be some things that you're like, great, I'm on board with, other things you're not. The problem becomes when you find yourself below the line in everything, and that is an indication that you really need to take a hard look at what's going on and maybe make some changes. So that's a great one.
Okay. What can I do if I realize I'm below the line and can't seem to get myself above it?
This is a hard one, and it's a complicated one. I utilize the example of the accountability ladder because in my life I did have an experience where I was a supervisor in a particular role, realized I was below the line in this big change initiative. And so what are my choices? One is to try to get above it. Two is to maybe look elsewhere, maybe a different position, a different organization, because really can you stay in a leadership role and be below the line? And really the answer is no, and primarily because it's not good for you. Like the stress of that is not good. So, it really takes some soul searching at that point. If you really feel like you can't get yourself above the line, then looking for different opportunities may be where you need to go. But I understand it's a complex, it's very complex and it's very personal to people. So, but it may take some really soul searching with that one.
How can I use the accountability ladder with my employees?
Yes. So introduce it to them, show it to them. As I mentioned, it's a pretty easy model to understand. And so it's one of those things where you can just say, hey, I noticed maybe you're struggling, or you've had a lot of excuses lately, or maybe you're not on board with this. Where do you think you are? And just, have them, point out where they may be on the ladder, and then open up to that discussion about why that may be and how you can help. But it could definitely open up some good discussion.
Okay, next one. Can I utilize the tools provided even if the change is already occurring?
Yes, definitely. I mean, the ideal thing is that you utilize these tools in the pre-change phase, because you want to coordinate the message and communicate a common theme or message. But you can utilize these tools when a change is already in progress to help you figure out what's currently working, what is helping our change happen. Or if it's stalling in some areas, it'll help you to identify that, and also help you to focus on where you need to put your time and energy and effort to make the change successful. So yeah, any of these tools can be utilized both prior to the change happening or during the change happening. Those are really
Okay,
great questions.
we have time for one more. Do you have any tips on how to get in just enough people involved to ensure success of a change without creating a cast of hundreds in every change?
All right. Interesting. Say that one more time, just so I can be clear.
Do you have any tips on how to get enough people involved to ensure success of a change without creating a cast of hundreds in every change?
Yeah. Okay, so I think that's a great question. So I think one of the things you need to do is identify those key stakeholders. And it could be positional, okay? It could be positional that are representing certain areas of the organization, but it can also be those people who have a lot of influence over others, those natural leaders within all positions. So it doesn't necessarily need to be the head of that certain department, but in all groups, there are certain informal leaders, maybe people that have been there a long time, or people that are very respected in the organization that don't necessarily have a title, but that they're really influential. So I would seek out those type of people to put them in a committee or on a group to help you promote the change.
Okay, great. Well, that is the last question. So that does conclude our time together. We would like to thank you for attending and encourage you to register now for the full program that Christy has coming up on managing transition and embracing change during challenging times, which will be on December 8th and 9th. This program will be delivered live and virtual via Zoom and is open for registration on the website on your screen. All of our fall 2021 programs are scheduled and open for registration. So if you'd like to learn more about these programs and all of our other programs, I encourage you to contact us at 330-672-3416 or at yourtrainingpartner@kent.edu. We can bring all of our programs to your organizations, both live and virtually, and tailor them to fit your needs. You can join our extensive list of clients and bring Kent State to your organization. We encourage you to register for our next webinar, which is on Friday, August 20th when we will be discussing virtual onboarding, how to build engaging new hire experiences with Kent State facilitator Amy Solapsky. You can register at the website on your screen. And during this webinar, you will learn to explain the objectives of onboarding, summarize the stages of onboarding, and describe best practices for virtual onboarding, welcoming, structured, accessible, and accountable. Registration will be opening soon. For those attending live, you will be asked to complete a short survey. Please complete this survey so that we can be assured that we are bringing you the most usable and relevant content possible. You will also receive an email early next week with a link to view a recording of today's webinar. On behalf of Kent State Center for Corporate and Professional Development and our presenter, Christy Frieden, thank you for attending today and have a great weekend.